2018, and then we had it renewed in 2020. And industrial and manufacturing were targeted sectors that Kent County should pursue, and we have been pursuing them. But in order to attract those type of companies, we needed large parcels of land along the rail, and we didn't have an inventory of that. So what's changed in 20 years? And I'd like to give a big shout out to Cliff Gumstra, who is one of our partners in many projects. The thing that changed was Delmarva Central Railroad took over the short line on our peninsula from Norfolk Southern. And then rail demand, if you heard Dan talk, it's all about supply chain. Rail demand is on the rise, and these sectors usually, companies that need large parcels of rail are going to be usually large job producers with good paying jobs, and that was part of our target. So I'll turn it over to Marilyn for the study.
So when Linda came to us, it was her contention, as she has indicated to you, that she needed to do something about identifying the rail corridor. We knew it was there, but as far as being able to really talk about that with potential site selectors, that was kind of challenging. And so we met with Linda to scope out the study, and this is basically what the study includes. So for those of you who are familiar with, it kind of follows that pattern. If you are so inclined, this is what the study looks like, and you can find this on our website. And what you're going to see, which we're going to get to in a minute, is that this study, the narrative is relatively small. For a 100-page study, the narrative is 15 or so pages. But what's really important in this study are the maps. And we'll get to that in a minute about what we did to come up with the maps and how we represented the land along the rail and what we were able to give to Linda that could be helpful for her. Oh, it's mine again. So basically, as Linda mentioned, there was an original Rockport study in 2018. And KEP had come to us before, and there was an original rail study that the MPO did in 2018. And then we kind of jumped off from that study to expand on this one. As Linda mentioned, there was a very defined study area, and you'll see that on the maps. It goes from the north of the county line, south of the county, and it goes along the rail corridor. So it was very easy to define. We've already talked about the fact that a rail line existed, that we had an active rail partner that we could work with, and so it was very easy to define the study area. So, as we mentioned, there was an original study, and then that study included 5 recommendations. And when we went back and looked at that study of 2018, those 5 recommendations, for the most part, had not been implemented. So we immediately started there and said, hey, these things are still valid. We can't just ditch those things. Those things need to be incorporated, and then we need to build off from that. And so the most recent study, the 2022 study, we identified large acreage parcels along the rail. You're going to see in a minute, we created an interactive mapping tool that we were able to provide to KPP, and Zach's going to demonstrate that for you. But then we also thought that it was really important that we needed to provide some guidance for communities. Many of you work with small rural communities, and you know that capacity is sometimes a problem. They don't necessarily have a planner. Sometimes they don't have a town manager who's really capacity driven as far as being able to take on something like this. And so we felt like the study from our perspective as planners was that we needed to give communities some kind of tool to work with, because if they have to start with a blank page, it's too overwhelming. And so that was also a real significant focus for us in developing this study.
Comp plans.
Oh, the comp plans. So the first thing that we needed to do, obviously we had defined the study. They talk about residential, right? It's about building houses up against the rail, which is in complete conflict to what Linda's trying to accomplish. So us being able to dig in and look at these comp plans really is able to pinpoint those communities along the rail that maybe can be encouraged to consider a different path. Instead of just saying, okay, we're just gonna build houses and be done with it and pretend like this rail doesn't exist. So this review is to really help them to maybe consider a different path and a more appropriate or more advantageous long-range use for those parcels along the rail. So I know this is super tiny. If you love a good spreadsheet, you just go find this on our website. Because this is, so basically what we had to do was we had to start with an inventory of all the parcels. So Linda had shared with us kind of what she wanted to zone in on. So you can see those bullets up there, how we started to decide what's in and what's out, basically. So we started with about 600 parcels along the rail from north to south. And then, you know, there's that little spur that goes to the east. So we started with about 600 parcels. And then by applying this criteria that's listed here, we could start to screen out parcels, right? So obviously if it's ag preservation, if there's wetlands, if the parcel configuration didn't have much frontage, maybe it's a residential open space buffer, you get the drift. There were some things that original list of all the parcels, and then the red one is all the ones that came out of the study and were just eliminated. So then we got to what was left, right? So we had about 150 parcels left, and then we started to do a detailed examination of what was available on those parcels. So we started to look at them based on, they were individual parcels, right? And some of them often have individual owners. Some of them are tiny pieces, maybe less than an acre. So you kind of have this hodgepodge of availability. So what we immediately started to do was group the smaller acreage parcels into potentially larger, more usable opportunities. Because that's really what we need to, and again, that's what can help us convince municipalities that, hey, you might actually have something good here. But when you're looking at them in terms of those tiny individual parcels, maybe you can't see the vision for that. And the only thing that seems feasible is let's build houses, right? So that's what we tried to do, was develop some groupings. And then, and I failed to introduce Malcolm Jacob. He's on our team too. Our other person who's not here is Mike Ward. Some of you may know him. He's our GIS genius. And as we started to comb through the data, we figured out that there was a way to represent these, the groupings of parcels in this tiling approach. So that's what we created, was there are 44 tiles altogether along the rail. Some tiles don't have any available parcels, right? They're completely built out, or they consist of completely those things that were screened out. So some of them there's none. But we ended up with about a dozen, 12 to 15 of these tiles, where we could identify some real potential for possible preservation of these parcels for future development that was really rail dependent. And that's what we were really getting down to. So for each of, we divided up the parcels along the rail, and if you look at the study, or if you start to pick out, that's what you get. You have a tile for each of these geographic areas that runs north to south and then to the east. And when you pull up a tile, you get all this information. So you not only get where the rail is positioned, you can kind of see that red, that's a vacant parcel. The little spreadsheet underneath gives you all the basic vacant parcels, tells you what their zoning is, the parcel ID, the acreage, and then on the map, you're going to see utility, if it's in the growth zone, if it's a plus project area, all the parcel groupings. You're going to get all of that information for each individual tile as you kind of move your way down the geography of the county.
So we didn't have that information prior to that. We had to go to 4 different sources. If an inquiry came in and said we need 50 acres along the rail, we had to go everywhere to try to find that. And so now we have it all in one place. The other information that we didn't have, that we did get in this study, thankfully, is a majority of information about where the utilities are, because utilities are extremely important. When an inquiry comes in, they want to know, can they handle the power? Where's your sewer connection? Where's your natural gas? So the tiles now have listed on them where they could get the information of the utilities. So that was extremely important to us. And I should have said it in the beginning. As we went through the study and as we were trying to find rail sites before the study, we realized that the northern part of Kent County along the rail has been rezoned or zoned as housing all along the rail. So we figured if we didn't do something about this now, the rest of the county was going to have housing all along the rail.
Can I just make a point too? And we appreciate Shane. The utilities were really helpful. Yes. And so I just want to call that out, that it was very much a partnership project to be able to accumulate all of this information from our partners in the utility community.
So as Marilyn said, we ended up with like 10 areas to really look at. And then we narrowed it down to 3 areas where we want to concentrate this next year. And one of them is Viola North. And there's over 250 acres there if you compile the acreage together. And it's all zoned AR right now. There's also Felton South, we call this tile, 4 parcels, about 211 acres. And Cliff can tell you, since we got this information, we have used this a lot for inquiries, site visits. We have gone to these acres with rail-dependent users. And then there's Harrington South, 4 parcels, 270 acres zoned AR. These could be, as Marilyn said, a lot of them are private owners. And the purpose of us doing it wasn't to change any owner's mind. The purpose was, hopefully we can go to the municipalities and say, you have a real asset here. If you want in your next comp plan, please write something in there about industrial use along the rail. If you want a sample ordinance, we're going to hopefully work with the IPA to get a sample ordinance that the owner, if they want, can easily get this rezoned into industrial, because this has been identified in this study. So Zach Prevola, my colleague who uses the interactive maps all the time, is going to walk you through the interactive maps.
Yeah, I don't touch the interactive map.
I touch once in a while.
Overview of the whole study of Kent County. And as you can see, the black outlines are the tiles that Marilyn was mentioning that go all along the rail. And what's great about this is this looks like a lot right now, but we can actually control the layer list, turn it all off, and you have just the outlines of the rail itself. And then if you turn it back on, you have all the utility information. But also, if you're trying to figure out where you are, get a little closer, you can zoom in exactly to where some of these parcels are. And we have road names and everything involved as well. And then, like she said, we have in the green is our utilities line. So,
Tell me how you look up an ownership.
so there's a lot of information in this over here on this side right here. You can see the parcel information, and that takes you right to our Kent County zoning. And that gives you all the owner information, exactly what the zoning is. If you don't see it, but there's also in here, they already created the zoning for us, which makes it even easier, and it's already part of the map as well. And if we wanted to really narrow it down to what our top 10 are for the largest acres in the area, there's also the top 10 tiles, and all you have to do is click on the 3 dotted lines over there, hit zoom to, and it takes you right to there. And that's a great thing for us. We're trying to identify the top municipalities that we should go into and present to and make aware of these opportunities. Thank you.
Nice job.
I just say, this was, again, our GIS,
Yeah.
he just feeds on finding new and fun things in the mapping universe. And so,
The end user, and you've had a couple end users of rail that wanted rail, what kind of impact does it make for them? Or what kind of, has it made already on their operations?
Oh, we'll say, you know, just to take Delmarva Corrugated, that was a true partnership with the city of Dover, the Prosperity Partnership, our organization. You know, they have 150 jobs. They built, you know, Dan showed, they built a 457,000 square foot warehouse. They've pumped 150 million or more into our economy to date. So that's what kind of impact it has. And Rockport identified we need to be going after the industrial, manufacturing, high-paying jobs. So we've kind of layered some of our incentives in Kent County to mirror our targeted industries, and we've been pretty successful. But yes, there's a lot of really good impacts.
So is everybody
Plus, they're taking
familiar?
trucks off the road.
right, trucks off, but is everybody familiar? At Delmarva Corrugated, there's a spur that goes right into the
in the
facility.
plant. Same
So,
with,
I mean, for them, it is literally, it goes inside the door. And that makes a huge, that was a huge, that is something they wanted and they were specific about.
Same with our national vinyl products. That's a redevelopment of the old Pittsburgh Paint and Glass. The reason they ended up there was because the rail ran right in back of that building. They could utilize that for raw product.
Raw materials in, finished product out.
Okay.
Dan?
The GIS system that shows where the utilities are, two questions. Does that show capacity or just location?
It's just
Just
location.
location. And is that something you just pulled in, like, that was already existing on GIS and then you brought it to your website, or how did you do that?
For capacity, we have to contact that utility at that site.
No, but like, what you showed the website, just in terms of like, was that on like the counties?
No,
it's
we
on-
had to get it.
You had
The
to get it.
MPO, our Mike,
It's on
our
their
GIS
website.
person, he had to reach out to those
Okay.
utility, to others.
For like security reasons?
Some.
Any of that?
It wasn't resistance. I mean, they just were very honest about, this is how far we can go. You know, this is how much we can share with you. And then beyond that, yeah, we have a security, a potential risk. And we were good with that because this was so much more than we had ever had in one place before, that we were very pleased with what we have. But absolutely, and it wasn't resistance, it was just a really honest conversation that said we can go to here and we can't go any further. We said, we'll take
But
it.
there isn't, besides, what I'm aware of, outside of Kent County, there isn't a map like that that gives you parcels and utilities outside of this study. So we were really grateful.
Yeah.
that this
We were-
included
Yeah, they were very
Yes.
willing to partner with us to
And the other
the best
thing
their
is-
ability.
You know, the end user needs good roadways. In addition to the rail, they need to ship their product in or out by truck. So, you know, parcels that were landlocked or didn't have access to a road or that had to ride by a bunch of residential houses weren't included in this.
Yeah, the screening process was pretty rigorous.
Okay, any other questions?
Oh, there's
Go
a-
ahead.
One question.
Maybe like way farther out, have you looked at all at like parcels along inactive rail lines, like the line from Clayton down to Marydale?
We talked about inactive rail lines, and we kind of set that aside. We did not incorporate it into this, but we do have, because Mike loves a good map, so we have them on a map that we just haven't done anything else with. We also talked about, should we expand this? I mean, obviously, the
Statewide.
rail doesn't end at Kent County, so we've talked about, should we at least expand it to the canal, and should we expand it? So those are potentials for, you know, kind of version 2. They're just not here right now.
And if we could wave a magic wand, we would make the rail line that went into Clayton active. But that, Clayton has lost pretty much all of the rail, the majority of it, you know, that was coming in from the west. As you talk about inactive rail lines. Anybody else? Good?
Cliff?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you so much for putting this together. As you know, it is absolutely vital when you are trying to land a big new customer, a big new, economic engine for an area to have all this information. When they're on a property search, it's got to be turnkey. And having this type of information in one repository, I mean, it's best in class. It's what we've been
We
working
got
on
a
for
call on a
years.
Wednesday night, we put a site together, a site tour that did how many sites, like by that Friday.
Yeah.
So having this was invaluable.
It needs to be used in the other counties on the entire peninsula as, this is the way to do it. So thank you.
How do we keep it up to date?
That's a good question, and we've talked about that
We've
one
talked about
quite a bit.
We've talked about that, and we've talked about, can we, at the MPO, obviously, we're not going to do a change, say, every time there's a rezone, so we've talked about that. Do we do it annually? Do we do it, twice a year? We haven't quite figured that out yet, but that's a valid point, because the interactive map, it becomes less and less interactive as time goes on. So yes, we've had that conversation, but we haven't really figured out, and for Linda, we love working with Linda, but obviously Linda's not our only partner, and we have other projects, and so we have to figure out what is reasonable to keep it, reasonably current for her, but also is reasonable for our tiny staff. But that's a valid point, and we have talked about that.
Great, thank you both so
Thank
much.
you.